No play on the ball. 2 hands. Boom! Clothesline Sophie Cunningham right in the face. One more time. No play for the ball. Clotheslines Sophie Cunningham right in the face.
No play on the ball. 2 hands. Sophie Cunningham's face, flagrant 2, immediate ejection. And then, from the locker room, a social media post about white privilege. Magic Johnson watched all of it. And Magic Johnson, who has seen every level of competitive basketball from the Showtime Lakers to the ownership suites of the Los Angeles Dodgers, who has been in the rooms where the biggest decisions in professional sports get made, did not hold back. Permanently ban her.
So Dijonai Carrington goes into the locker room and she tweets out, white privilege. Dijonai Carrington goes to the locker room and tweets out white privilege. Then Dijonai Carrington tweets 823. Seems like a threat to me.
August 23rd, the next time the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever meet. A date posted on social media by a player who had just been ejected for a flagrant 2 foul that clotheslined Sophie Cunningham, and who had already posted about white privilege from the locker room. Magic Johnson saw the attack. He saw the social media post, he saw the date, and when one of the most respected voices in the history of professional basketball calls for a player to be permanently banned from the WNBA, this has moved from controversy into something the league cannot contain with a press release. Magic Johnson does not issue public statements about player conduct lightly. He is not a social media commentator. He is not a hot take merchant operating from the edges of sports discourse. He is a Hall of Famer, a 5-time NBA champion, a businessman whose sports ownership experience includes MLB and whose institutional credibility in the world of professional athletics is essentially unmatched. When Magic Johnson says permanently ban her after watching Dijonai Carrington clothesline Sophie Cunningham with 2 hands to the face, tweet about white privilege from the locker room, and then post a date that sources are describing as a threat, the WNBA has to respond. Because if Magic is saying it, the conversation is no longer confined to the basketball world. It is everywhere. But what really started all of this is not what fans think. To understand why Magic Johnson's call for a permanent ban landed with the force it did, why it has not just generated social media conversation, but institutional pressure that the WNBA cannot manage its way around, you have to start with what Dijonai Carrington did and what she did after. Because this is not a single incident that caught an observer off guard. This is a documented, multi-incident, multi-season pattern of dangerous contact that Magic Johnson and every other serious observer of this league has been watching build toward exactly the kind of moment that Sophie Cunningham experienced. The clothesline was the culmination, not the origin.
Take Dijonai Carrington up to her old bag of dirty tricks. You knew it. You knew it. With all of the chatter, all of the talk going around the Indiana Fever, especially following Sophie Cunningham's comments, you knew Dijonai Carrington was going to find a way to go viral during today's game.
You knew it. That is the assessment, and not a surprise reaction from observers who were caught off guard, but the confirmed expectation of people who had been watching Dijonai Carrington's pattern of behavior and who understood that Sophie Cunningham's public comments about the institutional environment around Caitlin Clark had made her a specific target. Because Cunningham did not become a target by accident. She became a target by telling the truth, by going on record about the coordinated campaign against Clark, by naming the institutional jealousy, by refusing to perform the diplomatic silence that the league's culture pressures active players toward. And Carrington, who has a documented history of physically targeting players, who has been ejected for dangerous contact in multiple games, who has committed flagrant fouls against multiple opponents in a pattern that spans more than one season, saw Sophie Cunningham in that building and saw an opportunity.
Dijonai Carrington was drooling, foaming out the mouth at the opportunity to get some clout from the Fever girls. You know she was going to look at Sophie Cunningham. The first time she saw Sophie Cunningham, you knew she was going to right upside her head. And the first time she saw Sophie Cunningham, she right upside her head.
The first time she saw Sophie Cunningham. That is the timing. 8 minutes into the game. Not late in a physical contest where emotions had been building for 40 minutes. 8 minutes in. The play described as Sophie in transition. The moment Carrington saw her opportunity and took it. 2 hands. No play on the ball. Clothesline. Right in the face. Are you out of your mind? That is what Sophie Cunningham said in the immediate aftermath and the basketball world. Watching the replay, watching the 2 hands with no play on the ball, watching the flagrant 2 call and the immediate immediate ejection arrived at the same question. Is Dijonai Carrington out of her mind? Or is this exactly what she came to that building to do? Magic Johnson's answer to that question, delivered with the institutional authority of someone who has seen professional sports competition at every level and who knows the difference between physical basketball and targeted physical assault, was neither. It was something more damning. It was, this is a pattern, this is documented. This is not something the league can absorb with a 5-game suspension and a press release. This requires permanent consequences. And then, the moment that took the situation from a flagrant foul story to a full institutional crisis, Dijonai Carrington went into the locker room after her ejection and posted on social media, August 23rd, the next time the Chicago Sky and Indiana Fever meet.
Dijonai Carrington goes into the locker room and she tweets out, white privilege. Dijonai Carrington goes into the locker room and tweets out, white privilege. Then, Dijonai Carrington tweets 8:23. Seems like a threat to me. Seems like a threat to me.
Posted by a player who had just been ejected for a flagrant 2 foul, who had already posted about white privilege, who was apparently using social media from a locker room she was ejected to communicate a specific, dated, targeted message about a future encounter with the player she just clotheslined. Is that a threat? The basketball world is calling it one. Magic Johnson is calling it one. And the WNBA, which has historically responded to these situations with the kind of measured institutional language that satisfies nobody, has to decide whether this is the moment that requires something different. Magic says it is. And Magic's voice carries weight that the WNBA cannot dismiss. Let us be precise about why Magic Johnson's call for a permanent ban is categorically different from the fan outrage, the commentary community's reaction, and the social media response, all of which have been significant and sustained, and why it forces the WNBA into a position it cannot manage with careful language. Magic Johnson is not a partisan in the WNBA's internal politics. He does not have an institutional stake in the outcomes of individual games or the fortunes of specific players. He is not a keep the vision fan reacting from personal investment in the Indiana Fever's success. He is one of the most respected figures in the history of American professional sports, a player whose competitive career defined an era, a businessman whose post-playing success has made him one of the most credible voices on the intersection of sports, business, and institutional accountability. When Magic Johnson says the WNBA should permanently ban Dijonai Carrington, he is not saying it as a fan. He is saying it as someone who understands what leagues have to do to protect their institutional credibility when a specific pattern of behavior reaches a threshold that suspensions and fines cannot adequately address. And the WNBA has to respond, because here is the institutional reality that Magic's statement creates. The WNBA has been managing the Carrington situation and the broader situation around physical targeting of Clark and now Cunningham, with the kind of measured, graduated response that institutional leadership typically applies to conduct issues in professional sports. Fines, suspensions, statements about the league's commitment to player safety, each one insufficient, each one followed by another incident, each one adding to the documented pattern that Magic has now publicly characterized as requiring the most significant consequence available: permanent removal from the league.
How come every time I'm watching a flagrant foul, you're committing the foul? How come every time I'm watching a dirty play, you in the play? Dijonai, can we go a week without you flailing and going after somebody? Can we just go 1 week? That's all I'm asking.
Can we go 1 week? That is the question. And it is the question that defines the pattern Magic Johnson is responding to. Not a single incident. Not an emotional moment in a competitive game that produced unfortunate contact. A recurring, documented, apparently unstoppable pattern of a player who keeps finding herself at the center of dangerous contact situations. The ponytail pull, the Skylar Diggins chase down, the eye poke on Clark in the rookie season, the hip checks and body tackles and hard fouls that span multiple seasons and multiple opponents. And now, the clothesline on Sophie Cunningham, 8 minutes into the game with no play on the ball. How come every time? Magic's call for a permanent ban is the institutional response to that question. Because when the pattern cannot be interrupted by graduated consequences, the only remaining consequence is the permanent one.
Stephanie White. Why do I give a damn about your facial expression, Stephanie White? Weren't you the head coach of the Connecticut Sun 2 years ago? while Dijonai poked her in the eye, and then you guys probably went into the locker room and kikied and ha-ha'd in the locker room after Dijonai poked her in the eye? Weren't you the head coach of the Connecticut Sun when Marina Mabrey hip-checked Caitlin Clark across the floor?
And here is where Magic's call for a permanent ban connects directly to the institutional accountability conversation that the Indiana Fever's coaching situation has been generating all season. Because Stephanie White was the coach of the Connecticut Sun when Carrington was first establishing this pattern. White was on that sideline when the eye poke happened, when the hip checks happened, when the dangerous contact that defines Carrington's documented history was being committed. White was the head coach of the team. And now White is the head coach of the team whose players are on the receiving end of that same pattern. And she stood at the podium and defended Carrington's intent after the Sophie Cunningham clothesline. Magic Johnson's permanent ban call is directed at Carrington, but the institutional accountability it demands cannot stop with the player. It has to reach the coaching staff that knows Carrington's history and chose to defend her anyway. And then there is the August 23rd social media post, which Magic and sources inside the basketball world are characterizing as something more serious than a competitive message.
Dijonai Carrington tweets 8:23. Seems like a threat to me. Seems like a threat to me.
A threat. That characterization, if accurate, if the league reviews the August 23rd post and arrives at the same conclusion that the basketball world has, transforms the institutional response from a player conduct matter into something that requires the WNBA's security infrastructure to take an active role.
Sophie Cunningham wasn't really getting booed in Chicago. Sophie Cunningham not getting booed every time she touches the ball shows how crazy the fans in Portland, Seattle, and Minnesota truly are. And this person said, am I crazy or is she getting a loud cheer from the crowd when she checks in? Announcer, a lot of people online were saying Sophie Cunningham's getting cheered.
Because threatening a player on social media after being ejected for physically attacking her is not a basketball conduct issue. It is a personal safety issue, and the league's obligation to protect its players from physical harm, which it has been failing to discharge adequately for the entire season of documented targeting, extends beyond the court and into the space where social media posts become threats. Magic Johnson understands this. His call for a permanent ban is, in part, a call for the league to acknowledge that what has been happening to Clark, to Cunningham, and potentially now in the form of a dated social media threat is not something that can be managed with a suspension. In the middle of everything, the clothesline, the ejection, the white privilege post, the August 23rd threat, Magic Johnson's call for a permanent ban, something happened in Chicago that nobody expected. The crowd cheered Sophie Cunningham.
Then you have this guy, race hustler for ESPN, Kareem Copeland, Black Lives Matter, Kareem Copeland, put a fist in the air, Kareem Copeland. Sophie Cunningham, big mad after a foul from Dijonai. This is a writer, journalist, loser for ESPN. This is what we're doing. Sophie Cunningham, big mad after a hard foul. You know this guy was happier than a pig in shit. You know this guy was happier than a pig in shit watching Sophie Cunningham get hit. Again.
Getting cheered in Chicago, the home market of the team whose player just clotheslined her. That is not the outcome Dijonai Carrington anticipated when she posted white privilege from the locker room and then tweeted August 23rd as what sources are characterizing as a threat. That is not the outcome certain media voices anticipated when they framed the flagrant foul as Sophie Cunningham being big mad after a hard foul. The Chicago crowd, whose institutional loyalty should reasonably be expected to trend toward the home team and the home team's player, cheered Sophie Cunningham when she came back into the game. That crowd reaction tells you something specific and important about where the broader basketball public actually stands on this situation, as opposed to where certain media voices and certain social media posts are trying to locate it.
This is why I tell you all the damn time, it's hard for me to respect a lot of the people that cover this league, because they're all true colors always come out. And I'd rather err on the side of caution. Like, nah, you might say one nice thing, but nah, I kind of have a feeling of who you are, really. Oh wow, you said a nice article. Nah, I'm gonna refrain from giving you too much praise, because I have a feeling this is the type of person that you are.
Big mad after a hard foul. That is the framing certain ESPN voices applied to a flagrant 2 foul that produced a clothesline with 2 hands and no play on the ball. Big mad. As though the problem in this situation is Sophie Cunningham's emotional response rather than the documented physical contact that produced it. Magic Johnson saw that framing. He rejected it directly with the institutional credibility of someone whose voice in the sports world cannot be dismissed as partisan or emotional or uninformed. Permanently ban her.
And I am 99.9% sure the only person that walked into that building with an inkling that something was going to happen, that Dijonai was going to try to clout chase, that Natasha Harron was going to try to clout chase, the only person with enough brains and enough maybe street sense, street smart, was Sophie Cunningham. She's probably the only one that walked into that building knowing this might get left and leave it up to Dijonai Carrington. Yeah, it went left.
Not Sophie was big, mad. Not it was a hard foul. Not let's wait for the league's review and see what the graduated response looks like. Permanently ban her. True colors always come out. That is the assessment of the media coverage. And it is an assessment that the Chicago crowd's reaction validates from an unexpected direction. Because if the media framing of Sophie Cunningham big mad after a hard foul accurately reflected where the basketball public stood on this situation, the Chicago crowd would have booed Sophie every time she touched the ball. They didn't. They cheered. The disconnect between certain media voices' framing of this situation and the actual public sentiment documented in real time by the crowd reaction in the home building of Carrington's team is the disconnect that Magic Johnson's permanent ban call has now placed directly in front of the WNBA's institutional leadership. The public sees what happened. The crowd in Chicago sees what happened. Magic Johnson sees what happened. And the media. Voices who are framing this as Sophie Cunningham being big mad are being seen for exactly what they are. And Sophie Cunningham, who got up with blood in her mouth, who had Michaela Timpson pulling her away from a confrontation she clearly wanted to have, who laughed and clapped about it afterward in the way that only someone with Sophie's specific brand of unapologetic composure can, knows exactly what she walked into that building prepared to face.
By and large, and I say this every week, by and large, the majority of the players in the league agree with Dijonai Carrington, and a good amount of those players are on the Indiana Fever.
She knew. Sophie Cunningham walked into that building knowing that her public comments, her documented position as Clark's most vocal defender, her refusal to perform the diplomatic silence that protects players from exactly this kind of targeting, had made her a target. She walked in anyway. She played her game. She got clotheslined 8 minutes in. She got up with blood in her mouth. Michaela Timpson pulled her away, and then she laughed and clapped. That is Sophie Cunningham. And Magic Johnson, watching all of it, called for the permanent removal of the player who did it. Here is where the full picture comes into focus, and the picture it forms is one that the WNBA's institutional leadership cannot look at honestly and choose in action. Magic Johnson has called for the permanent ban of Dijonai Carrington. That call is now documented, time-stamped, part of the public record of what the basketball world's most respected voices think should happen in response to a flagrant too-foul, a white privilege social media post, and what sources are characterizing as a dated threat toward a specific player on a specific future game day. The WNBA has options.
You don't think this was political? You don't think this was, oh, I disagree with Sophie Cunningham, wait until the next time I see her? Oh wow, Sophie Cunningham's speaking truth to nonsense, wait until the next time I see her? Everybody knew that.
It can acknowledge the seriousness of what Carrington did, not just the flagrant two, but the social media behavior that followed, and pursue the kind of extended suspension that communicates meaningful institutional consequence. It can investigate the August 23rd post as a potential threat and respond accordingly. Or it can issue the kind of measured, carefully worded statement that acknowledges the incident without committing to the level of consequence Magic has called for. The league's history suggests option 3. Magic's statement suggests that option 3 is no longer adequate.
Sophie Cunningham laughing and clapping after Dijonai hit her in the face. Yeah, Sophie Cunningham, good sport about it. After the fact, of course.
A good amount of those players are on the Indiana Fever. That detail, delivered with the kind of uncomfortable honesty that defines the Keep the Vision commentary all season, is the detail that makes Magic's permanent ban call land differently than it would if this were simply an opponent's conduct issue. Because if there are Indiana Fever players who agree with Carrington's perspective, if the locker room fracture that the coaching staff's decisions have been producing all season has created the kind of internal division that aligns certain players with the institutional forces that have been targeting Clark and Cunningham, then the problem is not just Carrington. It is organizational. It is structural. It is the consequence of a coaching staff that has been managing the locker room in ways that have been documented all season as working against the two players most responsible for this franchise's relevance. Magic sees the full picture. His permanent ban call is the loudest, most credible expression of what the full picture demands. Wait until the next time I see her. That is the interpretation. The specific documented reading of Carrington's August 23rd post that Magic Magic Johnson and the sources characterizing it as a threat are aligned on, not a competitive message about basketball. A specific dated promise of consequences for a player who has been speaking truth publicly. Sophie Cunningham has been speaking truth about the institutional environment around Clark, about the coordinated resistance, about the old guard's response to Clark's arrival. She has been the voice, the only active player voice, that named these things publicly and on record. And Carrington's clothesline, her social media posts, and the August 23rd date she put in public view are, according to Magic Johnson and the people watching this situation most closely, the physical and social media expression of what happens when that voice creates the kind of institutional discomfort that produces retaliation. The WNBA cannot allow that retaliation to go inadequately addressed. Laughing and clapping. That is Sophie Cunningham, who knows exactly what she walked into, who was prepared for exactly what happened, and who responded to getting clotheslined with the kind of good-natured, competitive toughness that has defined her entire public profile. She did not get ejected. She did not get a technical foul. She pulled herself together, got back in the game, and played. And the Chicago crowd cheered her. Magic Johnson watched all of it and said, permanently ban the player who clotheslined her. Here is where everything lands. Dijonai Carrington walked into that Chicago building knowing what Sophie Cunningham had been saying about the institutional environment around Caitlin Clark. 8 minutes into the game, she saw her opportunity. 2 hands, no play on the ball, clothesline, right in the face, flagrant 2, immediate ejection. White privilege tweeted from the locker room. August 23rd posted as what the basketball world is calling a threat. Magic Johnson, Hall of Famer, 5-time NBA champion, one of the most respected institutional voices in the history of American professional sports, watched all of it and said, permanently ban her. The WNBA has to decide whether it is an institution that responds to Magic Johnson's call with the kind of decisive, meaningful, institutional action that actually changes the pattern, or whether it issues a statement, announces a suspension that expires in time for August 23rd, and allows the cycle to continue. Can we go 1 week? The basketball world is asking. The Indiana Fever players who had their teammate clotheslined are asking. Sophie Cunningham, who laughed and clapped and came back and played and got cheered by the Chicago crowd, is asking. And Magic Johnson, whose institutional credibility makes his permanent ban call impossible for the WNBA to simply absorb and move past, is demanding an answer. The league has to decide. Before August 23rd, Sophie Cunningham was clotheslined 8 minutes into the game. Magic Johnson called for a permanent ban. August 23rd is on the calendar, and the WNBA is running out of time to get this right.